do you wish you knew about money when you were a teen? Today, with Marilyn from the Kids Finance Initiative, we take a look at the habits and attitudes that your children need to shape and have about money, and how that impacts and affects their personal financial life now and in the future. Our guest for today is Miss Marilyn Pinto. Financial literacy was the subject Marilyn wanted her daughters to learn about, and it wasn't being taught in the current education system. Most kids will go through 15 years of schooling and not have a single class on how to manage money or budget or choose a credit card, much less use one prudently. So she decided she was going to do something about it. And that's how Kids Finance Initiative got started. And over the last 4 years, this organization has taught more than 3,500 kids how to be smarter about money. And Marilyn isn't just an expert on the topic of financial education for kids. She's also an expert in teaching this to kids in a way that's most effective and in a way that they love to learn. She's partnered with some of the biggest and most respected institutions in the region and has been regularly featured in the national press, and thus casting a much needed spotlight on an incredibly important yet overlooked topic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anselm. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I hope my kids are going to listen to this podcast.
I hope so too.
And
actually, this is more for parents, so let's hope you listen carefully.
No, I will send my kids across to you. The parents often complain their kids are spoiled. I'm going to lead in with that because I've got 2 teenage children and they are very demanding. How do you see that? What are your views on that, having interacted with so many different children?
That's a good question because that's probably one of the most common questions that I get with regard to my kids are spoiled, they demand too much, what do I do about it? My answer is probably not going to be very much liked by parents, but it's the truth. What I have to say is that when we say our kids are spoiled, our kids aren't like fruit. They're not like something you keep on a kitchen counter and they get spoiled, right? So kids get spoiled because of behaviors you either ignore, you tacitly condone, or you actively encourage. So they only will do things because you have set the certain boundaries. So if your kids are spoiled, it's mainly because you haven't set proper boundaries or because of things that you're actively condoning or encouraging. So I would ask parents to sort of turn the spotlight a little bit towards them and see what is it that they are doing wrong, that their kids are sort of feeding off. Because typically it's not fair to blame the kids. They are just being kids and they are going to make the best of whatever situation you give them. So what's the situation you're putting in front of them? I'd like us to look at it from that angle, if that makes sense.
Oh, of course, absolutely. I think you raise a good point there because we know that kids emulate, what they see, and very often, I like how you put it, they will take advantage of what they're seeing.
It's teenagers. That's their mission in life, to push their boundaries, to see how far they can push them. So it really means setting very clear boundaries in terms of what's acceptable and what's not, and what you will stand for and what you won't. So and once those boundaries are set, it's honestly, for the kids who've come to the program, I have yet to hear parents who said, oh no, they're still demanding, because once they understand how money works, they understand the different aspects of it, they're actually making smarter decisions than most grown-ups.
And do you see that permeate to other aspects of their life as well?
I think so, because money is not something that you teach, it's not like history or geography.
Correct.
It's not like within a certain silo. It actually affects every aspect of your life. It affects your confidence. It affects the way, what jobs you take up. It affects your relationships. So I think if you've got a good handle on money and how you manage it, the effects actually spill over into different aspects of your life. So I think that's,
Very interesting, because I think we get an education in school and in college, but not too much of, like we, in
You're being kind by saying not too much. I've done an MBA program, I've done a master's in finance. I can tell you it taught me a big fat zero about money. So when you say not too kind, you're being, that's a euphemism on how our education system actually teaches kids or grown-ups about money. They just don't.
Yeah. And absolutely, I mean, to put it bluntly, yes, there isn't too much of an education on money. I mean, you get finance, but that's not
it's corporate finance.
It's corporate
teaches
finance.
You how to handle company balance sheets.
Exactly.
It doesn't teach you how to handle your own money. And I think that sort of works. It's a double whammy, because kids who take finance or who are, corporate finance or accounting, they think they know about money.
Yeah.
They think that I'm smart because I've done commerce, I've done corporate finance, I know about money, but they don't. And that makes it doubly dangerous because now they think they know about money, but they don't. They think they can make smart decisions, but it's not. So do you see where this is leading?
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, and we had a guest on our podcast as well, who in fact gave us an example of a CFO, of a very, very successful CFO. Company's records, company's finances, company was spotless. I mean, you couldn't touch it. He did a fantastic job on it, but his own personal finance was in a mess. Yeah. And part of that problem, I think, stems from the fact that, like you correctly identified and said, that we don't probably have a good mindset.
And I guess it's also with regard to women, it makes it even worse because we women tend to leave the finances up to the man of the family because it's and that makes it so much worse for us because we're clueless about how to deal with it. Usually when most women are forced into learning about money, it's because they're either getting divorced or they're widowed, and that's the worst time to actually learn about anything. And I think not, and I've spoken to so many parents, they're enrolling their kids for the program, but they're saying, we still don't know. We still leave it up to our husbands. We still are clueless about any of the savings or assets that we have. And we don't want our kids to follow the same, just to follow the same path. We want a different path for them. Yeah. And that is what we are offering, essentially.
And it's a wonderful job that you're doing. I think I've read and seen some of the testimonials of parents, and I'm discounting the parents here completely. I've read the stories of the children themselves, and I think that was fascinating reading. Just to see that mindset shift, right? I mean, like I said, I've got 2 teenagers at home, and I'm definitely sending them across to you.
How old are your teens?
My daughter is 15, son is 17. So
great age to start.
They're a lot of fun. Yeah. So there's something that I read, and it seems you call yourself a rebel educator, and I'm going to dig into what does that mean?
Okay, so this happened because if you ask most people, what is your experience with school or college? And you're going to get answers ranging from bored and confused to frustrated and, disengaged. A lot of people say it was fun, but when they say it's fun, what they're talking about is the social circle, the interaction that affords. Nobody actually says the learning was fun. And I find that so ridiculous. We spent 17 years of our life in the education system. We spend a ton of money on our kids, right? And their fondest memories are hanging out with their BFF. I mean, there has to be something wrong here. And that is what I think we can't let that be. So learning should not leave kids feeling disengaged, feeling disempowered with no sense of agency over their own learning. I think that's unnatural. It's cruel and unusual punishment for them because teens and kids are biologically predisposed to learning. It's a survival instinct. That's how they learn. That's how they survive. And to think that our education system is leaving them disengaged, bored, and confused and frustrated and disempowered, most likely. That isn't what we want. What we want is for teens to feel so engaged. We don't want compliance. I want them to come because they're feeling so engaged and they love the interaction. I don't want them to be extrinsically motivated because of a grade they're going to get. I want them to be intrinsically motivated because they see the value in what they're learning. I also want them to be naturally curious because that's their nature. That's who they are. I think it's our job as teachers, as educators, as parents, to rekindle that engagement, to make sure our classes are engaging, to make sure that they understand how they will benefit. We need to take time to maybe see students for the individuals and not as a class. Maybe take a little more time to build relationships with the kids because I don't think any significant learning happens without a significant relationship, and I think that's quite clear. I also want kids to stop seeing themselves through the lens of aptitude tests or SAT scores or Instagram filters, as we say. I want us to stop putting them in, metaphorical boxes just because some higher powers that be say that they need to be like this. I want them to be able to stand up and own the traits that make them different, because that is essentially that's what's going to be their USP later in life. Absolutely. By putting them in a little box and saying you need to fit in here, we're really doing them a disservice. So what I want to do as a rebel educator, and what a rebel educator I believe does, is dismantles that framework of fear and coercion around education, which there is. There is a whole framework of fear and coercion.
I absolutely agree.
And I think that needs to be dismantled. I think we need to inspire our kids to learn far beyond what is mandated by the education system, because that's when true learning is.
Sure.
I think we need to inspire them to a global consciousness, not just a nationalistic one, to a sense of justice, not just lawfulness.
Very interesting.
A respect for life, all life.
Sure.
That's what a rebel educator does, and I think that's what I strive to do every day. So I hope that answers your question.
Fascinating, and really also... So I'll share a little bit of a story with you, right? When my son was in school, he was in a particular curriculum. I'll not name the school or the curriculum, but at a certain stage, I could see that whole curiosity go out of his approach.
Suddenly from loving science, he went to hating science? Suddenly from loving subjects, he went to hating it?
Not just subjects, but I think in general approach, there was a lot of creativity before. He would do a lot of things, etc., etc. And that just sort of went away. I could see that, as a parent, I could see that happening, and I could see the transition. So shifted schools to a different curriculum, and where there was a lot more engagement, where there was a lot more practical sort of conversations with regard to, and thankfully, touch wood, both my children have sort of flourished and changed after that. But I can resonate with what you're saying in terms of the curriculums, and I don't know how the problem can be resolved and tackled. But the curriculums, do the curriculums drive something like that? Do the teachers? What is the role?
I think it's more teacher based. Like I said, I don't think kids have a favorite subject. What they have is a favorite teacher. If they like the teacher, they're fully motivated to study. They love the subject. If you'll notice, most kids, their favorite subject it sort of just trails along to their favorite teacher. And that is something that I think, that's such an immense power that teachers hold with them, that you have the power to make this subject somebody's favorite subject just because of the way you teach it. And that is something I don't think any educator should take for granted, or that's the power that we have. Absolutely. And that's exactly it. I mean, I know my daughter, she used to love science, and then one year she had a teacher who was just, the kids were terrified of her because if they asked her a question, she would first yell back at them and say, she went from loving science to absolutely detesting the subject. And the fact that can happen because of one person. So I don't really think it's the curriculum. I've seen so many different curriculums. Sure. I think a lot of it has to do with the actual teachers, the person teaching the curriculum. It doesn't matter what curriculum it is. It is all about the teacher.
Absolutely. I mean, while the curriculum needs to evolve as well.
Of course, that's a given. But I think the right teacher can also make it really engaging and make the kids motivated to learn. And I think and that goes beyond age groups, whether we are 13 or 37. We all like a teacher that we can relate to, that sees us as a person, that actually knows us. That's what I'm saying. I think the thing of building a relationship is very key. Correct. There's no significant learning that can happen without a significant relationship, irrespective of which stage in your life you are.
Yep, and today we're learning a lot later in life as well, in terms of it's really become a continuous process. I mean, we don't stop learning anymore.
It has to be.
It has to be, and I agree. And teachers can make all that difference. Parents come to you very often and talk to you about their kids. When you're having those conversations with them, they're describing their children or describing the pain that they're having with their children. I'm sure there are thoughts going in and around your head as well as to, there's the wrong perspective that the parents are taking, or they're making a mistake in the way they approach it or they think about it. So what are those common things that you see as mistakes that parents make? All
right. So firstly, I guess I'd like to say that as parents, we're doing our best. No one is actively making a mistake, knowing they're making a mistake. So it's very unconscious. It's because that's the way we've been brought up. And we have 100 other things on our plate. Sure. Actually taking time to explain how money works is not on their bandwidth. And it's also not part of their core expertise, because not many parents or grown-ups have had a financial education, right? Yeah. We've learned by making expensive mistakes. We're not sure that's exactly the right way we want our kids to learn, or that we are the best people to be teaching our kids this when we haven't learned about it through a formal education. But that being said, there are a couple of the most common ones that I see. Yep. So I think one of them would be that parents tend to focus a lot on tactics, like, should I give my kid a credit card? Or how much of an allowance should I give my kids? Or should I get them to read a particular book? Now, what I'm saying is that that's all great, but that's all very tactical. Yep. What we need as parents to do is just get the bird's eye view. Be a little more strategic about it. And when I say strategic, I mean talk about the mindset, talk about the goals, because that is the most strategic way of looking at it.
Yep.
Actually giving things like credit cards and allowances and debit cards is statistically shown to not make any difference.
Sure.
If they don't have the financial education. If they have the financial education, then these tools really amplify that effect and they become a lot more effective. But if they don't, then it doesn't make a difference. But a lot of parents tend to focus, because I've given my kid a credit card, hence they are, they know how to manage their money. No, they don't. Yeah. Or because your kid's using a budgeting app. Actually, no, they're using it just as a record keeping. Correct. They're not really thinking about what they're spending and in what category they should be spending less. Yeah. So that's why I say that I think parents should try and be more strategic and not so tactical with regard to it, because the tactics are easy to learn. Yeah. It's the strategy that requires a little bit of thinking.
Sure. And, that's really interesting. And so one of the things that you think that parents would probably understand, and probably it sort of comes back down to the fact that we've had a way of thinking about it ourselves as parents, right? So what would some of those strategies be? I mean, what would the mindset need to be to sort of get to that? So
firstly, I think we have to realize that with kids, not learning about money or not knowing about money for them is what I call an unconscious incompetence. They don't know that they don't know.
Correct.
They don't know how critical the skill is in order for them to step up and be successful. Yeah. They don't realize how critical the skill is for every aspect of their life. Yeah. Because trust me, if they knew, they'd do everything in their power to learn it really quickly, right? Sure. The point is that they don't know. It is an unconscious incompetence for them. Yeah. So what I think, what our job is, as our responsibility is as parents and as educators, is to take our kids from that journey from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. That's where they're so good at what they do. They're making good money decisions by not even having to think twice about it. Because it's ingrained as part of their DNA. It becomes second nature to them. And if we can recognize that there is this gap, that they don't know what they don't know, and that's why we need to be a little understanding when they don't want to come for classes to learn about money, because they think they don't know that this is a gap within them. Correct. So we can be a little more empathetic and just realize that it's because of their unconscious incompetence. So even if it needs, we need to explain it to them and bring them along that journey from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. That's when you've actually done what you...
No, you make a great point there. I mean, I think kids have a sense that money is important, but they don't really... I don't think they can point a finger as to, and if you ask them to explain why, they will probably give very strange and
because it is something that they need a little bit of guidance about. This is not something that a lot of parents think, I figured it out, so my kids will figure it out. Yeah, they will. But how much? I mean, it's going to cost them a lot in terms of time. Yep. It's going to cost them a lot in terms of money, and I think more damaging than that, it's going to cost them a lot in terms of self-confidence. Because once you realize you're making bad money decisions, it really begins to affect your confidence. It begins to spill out, like we said, into every other aspect of your life. So yes, there's a chance your kids could figure out by themselves, but why would you want them to when there's a safer way, there's a cheaper way, there's a way that's so much less painful. And that's essentially what we're saying.
Yeah. And also I think to add to that, once you're, and we did discuss this when we were offline, but once you've reached a certain sort of age, possibly, there are mindsets formed, attitudes formed about money that may be difficult to change. So
that's why I teach kids and not grown-ups. I like easy work. So for me, teaching kids and teens is very simple. It's very simple to mold them. They're still at a stage where you can mold their behaviors, their attitude, their mindset. Which is going to be a lot more difficult when they grow up. When those behaviors are set, your mindset is formed, your habits are formed, the way you behave is sort of set in stone, and it's very difficult to change. But with teens, you begin to see that change even while the program's going on. Like from a day-to-day basis, they come back the next day and they're like, when you see those, the scales fall off their eyes. It is one of the most amazing things as an educator to see that, because you know that they get it. Correct. They absolutely get it. And I was talking to somebody and they were saying that teenagers must be a very difficult age group to teach, and they are. They are the most difficult demographic to teach. I agree. But it's also the most rewarding, because for one, they are the at-risk group. They are the group spending more money than any generation ever did before them.
Correct.
Right? they are presently clueless about money, and they are going to graduate into one of the most economically challenging times in modern history. And they're going to do that with no knowledge of money. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah. So back to parents. What are the things that you've seen parents do that have actually worked? I mean, some of the things that have been good, or some good examples of parents doing the right thing.
So what we try to do is we try to get the conversation going. Now, normally, one of the main reasons why it doesn't work when parents do them by themselves, because of something that I call proximity bias. Your kids are too close to you to actually appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom, your sense of right. So, and that's a problem. But what we try to do is we actually we craft that conversation. We get the kids to come to you with certain questions. We train them in the art of asking questions in terms of getting the story from you. You see, because it's also not their fault. When most parents talk to kids about money, what do? We lecture. We're like, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't be doing that. What you're doing is wrong. You're not saving money. Our kids aren't listening to us. They've switched off. They've absolutely switched off when we went into lecture mode. What works is wrapping that message around a story, something that happened in your life that you could help them learn from. Just don't start that story with when I was young, because that doesn't work, right? So that's an immediate switch off. That's like, oh my goodness, let's switch the story off. But if you tell them a story and you wrap your message around a story, as humans, we are hardwired to listen to stories. And I think as kids and teens, so much more. So if you wrap your message around a story, it just works amazingly. And then kids come back to us when they've had that conversation. And for a lot of them, they could be 17, 19, 20-year-olds. This is the first time they've actually had a conversation with their parents about money, aside from give me some.
Yeah.
And for both sides, it's very revealing. They're like, wow, this is the first time I've actually had this conversation with you. I understand where you're coming from. I understand the kind of financial setbacks you've had. But more than that, I understand what led to those setbacks. What made you have them? What have you learned from them? Sure. These are typically not conversations that parents and kids have. But I think if you start that, it makes such a huge difference, because it brings the topic of money, front and center, which it isn't for most families and most cultures. It just isn't.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of I don't know if it's necessarily secrecy, or need to know.
It's like a taboo around a cultural,
like
a cultural taboo around money.
Yeah, and it's strange because you mentioned something earlier about a similar sort of experience when it comes down to the female gender with women.
Yes,
and that's something that we've from a company perspective also been exploring and looking at.
I've seen that. Yes.
And I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of the core issues that are there. And maybe the way to sort of resolve that is also through sort of having a proper education for more and more of our, individuals, I think, irrespective of gender. So, yeah. And that brings me to the analogy that you keep using, Keanu Reeves and the Matrix, and, teaching teens about money. Can you share that with us, with our listeners?
Yeah, so I use this analogy because I think it fits quite well. So in the movie The Matrix, when Morpheus gives Neo a choice, he gives you a red pill or a blue pill. So I think that's kind of the choice that you are given to give your teens. Are you going to give them the red pill or are you going to give them the blue pill? And I'd get into, so with the red pill, everything changes, right? I think life gets a bit harder because your kid is knocked out of his or her comfort zone. There's a little bit of time, there's time commitment, there's a money commitment as well. And your kid's not going to be very happy with you, right? Because they don't appreciate the opportunity that they've been given. So you have to understand that. That's the downside. But there's a massive upside to this, right? Your kid's going to understand how money works. They're going to understand how to modify their behavior, their mindset, and their attitude so that they are making smarter money decisions. They're also, just like Neo dodges the bullet, you can actually, with this, they're able to dodge the metaphorical bullet of scams, of bad loans, of just credit card debt, of just really all of the big financial pitfalls that grown-ups fall into. They're able to dodge that because they have the knowledge. It's going to cost you money in the short term, but the key word here is short term. If you look at the results, you look at the returns on that, they're just stratospheric. And that's what happens with the red pill. Now, you choose to give your kid the blue pill, and nothing changes, right? Your kids are never going to understand how people are enslaved by money. They're going to be blind to that fact. They are going to go back to their comfort zone and living in blissful ignorance. So, and they're going to be, the upside is they're going to be pretty happy with you because you're not forcing them to change.
Sure.
That's the upside.
Sure.
There's a really bad downside to that, as you can tell from now. They're going to fall in. It's not a question of if your kids are going to get into financial trouble. It's a question of when your kids get into financial trouble, because it's going to hit everybody, right? And that is something that we as parents need to understand. They're going to fall for scams. They're going to fall for all sorts of financial fraud because they're not prepared. I think also what's worse is that they're not going to start any wealth building activity until it's too late. Yeah. And that is one of the big upsides of giving them the red pill, because as soon as they have that, as soon as they're 18, they start wealth building activity, which is what's going to give them, sort of that backup, that security for the rest of their life. Whereas with the blue pill, they're going to be happier with you because you didn't force them to do anything. Yeah. But it's got a massive downside to it. And like Morpheus says, all I offer is the truth. The choice is yours.
All right. So, absolutely. And I think you touched upon one of the things which I just want to explore a little, right? Mm-hmm. Credit cards. And this is from experience, sort of talking with my children about from their perspective, credit cards are great. I mean, they see you using it all the time.
Of course, it's like a magic wand. You don't even have to. You just tap it around and you get whatever you want.
Yeah, that's right. Those of us who've lived a little have a good understanding of how good they are, and the pitfalls of not being able to understand and manage, a credit card. And I think it's probably one of the most devastating instruments that has been introduced in the financial side. You're
absolutely right. I think, and because it's so. Because exactly what you said, it can be very devastating. But again, a credit card, like anything else, is a tool, right? Yeah. So just because a knife is used to kill people, you can't say it's bad. Sure. You can use, and that's what we tell the kids as well. It can be really useful. It helps you build a credit score. There are so many advantages to having a credit card, and it's something that's become a necessity now. Yeah. So what we need to do is we actually need to teach them how to use it wisely. Because most kids, what basis they choose their credit cards? On the design, or if it's Barcelona or Real Madrid or whichever team is sort of names plastered all over it. So in our program, we actually have an entire class only dedicated to credit cards because it's that much of a problem. Yep. Even if you have every other aspect of your life sorted, if you cannot handle your credit cards properly, the guardrails are off. Absolutely. So we actually have this entire class which is dedicated to credit cards. And by the end of the class, the kids are just like, I'm like, did I scare you? Because that was exactly my intention. So, but they need to understand the kind of danger that it poses. They need to understand what kind of charges and fees are there. Because when you're sold a credit card, you're just told, you get buy one, get one free at the tickets, you get valet parking at the malls. That's how you're sold it. But the actual cost of having a credit card is so much deeper than that. The understanding needs to go so much deeper, and that's what the class actually gives them.
No, and I think that's extremely important. Many adults don't understand credit cards as well.
That's true. We actually go through reading a credit card statement. I mean, I know most grown-ups who don't know how to read a statement. They don't understand that. I actually know someone who is like 29 years old, who for many years has been paying just the minimum payment due because it said that on the card.
Yep.
Right. So
it's I completely get that. In fact, one of the biggest the biggest problems that we counsel clients on, adults generally, is understanding credit card debt and how they need to sort of think about it and get rid of it as quickly as possible. And I think you're going to the root of the problem while we are currently addressing.
I guess you all are working downstream. You all are fishing people out of the water, saving them. What we are doing is making sure that they don't get pushed in the first place. And that is exactly the upstream analogy. That is we don't want to wait until the kids are in trouble and then have some debt collection agency and explain it to them. What we are doing is we're making sure that they aren't pushed in the first place.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. So one of the other things that we touched upon in terms of being able to look at changing the mindsets of children at an early stage, and we believe that changing the mindset can lead to changed behaviors.
Oh, absolutely.
Are there examples that you can share with us in terms of any mindset changes or behavioral changes that you've seen?
Like I said, I think mindset's really important. That is the first lesson that we start with, because everything, 80% of what you want to learn just happens up here in your mind. The tactics are just 20%, right? So our first class is with mindset, because you will be surprised that kids as young, teenagers who have negative connotations about money, negative associations with money, and it's a very cultural thing, like money is the root of all evil, or do you think money grows on trees? But to see this change happen right from the time that they are that age, when they are, I don't want to be wealthy because wealthy people are evil or whatever. It's not a good thing to see. So changing that mindset for me is the number one thing for us as a program and as a company, because it is so important. Because we might teach them everything else, but if you don't sort out the mindset problem, it's kind of very ineffective, right? I might teach you how to use a credit card properly, but if you have negative connotations about money and you see that as, you can't demonize what you desire. So you can't want to be rich and say being rich is bad. But unfortunately, that is very much how, and it's surprising to see this as in really young kids as well. So I think that mind shift for us is really important to make, and it's easy to make. It's easily done. It takes 15-20 minutes to actually make that mindset, but you have to take that time to understand that this is something that you need to focus on. That's all. And I think any program, it doesn't matter what they teach, but if it doesn't start with mindset, then it really doesn't
get along very far, or doesn't have
there's not much effect that it actually has. So I think you need to start. There's a reason why the world's best coaches, businnesmen, athletes, the first thing they focus on is the mindset. So there's a reason it works. And that's what we need to focus on.
I mean, when you were saying that, the thought that was popping up into my head was money can't buy happiness.
Exactly.
So, I mean, are those the messages that we are leaving our children with? And
it definitely is. From what I'm seeing, I've taught, just today we did a class with, at separate times, but in total 150 kids. And I can tell you that almost half of them had the same issue. Like, no, but why do we have to learn about, money is not everything. It's not, for anybody who thinks that financial education is about money, they're missing the point. That's all I have to say, because it isn't about money. It's about giving you that security. It's about making you feel like, okay, I don't have to worry so much. I'm comfortable. It's about that self-confidence. It's about knowing that if you lose your job tomorrow, you're not scrambling around because your family is going to be on the streets. It's knowing that if you have a really bad job, and if you have a boss who, a really bad, you can walk away because you have that security, and you have something to fall back on. It's about knowing that if you do lose your job, again, you're going to be okay, right? All of these things, can you put a price on that? You can't put a price on that, right? It's the price of knowing that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. Your family is going to be okay, because you have the backup in place to deal with something. You have the emergency funds in place, and so it's not about money. It's about your peace of mind. It's about your well-being, your physical well-being. It's about your mental well-being as well, because more than 50% of mental health issues are caused due to financial problems, right? It's because of people either owe money or they have loans or in debt. So it isn't about the money. And once you get kids to see that, and they do see that, because they've seen this, whether, I think this pandemic has really brought this issue again out into the focus, into the spotlight. They've seen that with their families. They've seen that with their neighbors, with their friends, that money is a big problem. And no matter how grown up you are, people are still messing up. So what's going on here? So I think they learn pretty quickly. It's easy to teach them. That's all I can say.
That's good. I mean, that's a relief, and it's a good thing, because while messages can be mixed, it doesn't really help, especially when with children. You've seen, like we said, about 3,500 students walk in the door with you, and I'm sure during that period of time you've seen some transformations as well. Are there any examples that you can share of
so many? I mean, there's so many. I can't. It's not like I can, but I can tell you that the transformations you see begin to happen while the program is going on, and the transformations happen when the parents call me and say, my kids are now questioning my buying behaviors, and that for me is amazing, because they actually have the confidence to say, are you sure you need that 4th pair of nude shoes, mom? Or do you need that 5th bottle of cologne when you have? So it is them taking that step to say, I'm comfortable to talk to you about money. I'm comfortable to actually question your money decisions. And a lot of parents say that they're actually making smarter decisions than I am. They're not falling for the sales. They aren't falling for the marketing gimmicks. Because you have to understand, all of these marketing companies are spending millions of dollars training their staff how to sell. How much of training do your kids have in how to buy? right?
Yep.
Not at all. And how much are they buying? A lot.
Yep.
They are being served up. The algorithm gods, as you say, are serving them up things. You don't even know that they want them. They don't even know that they want them, right? But it's being served up on ads to them. So this is something that we really need to get our kids educated on. It's not a question of money anymore. It's more a question of their safety, their mental health, their physical well-being, because it's all so intricately tied.
Yeah, and you raise a very good point. Given the current state of technology, and with artificial intelligence, with machine learning coming about, with huge amounts of data being available, accessible on every possible behavior and the analysis of that, those messages are just going to get even more spot on in terms of being able to sort of bring that thing up. And if they don't have the framework to deal with it, it's just going to lead to a lot of
yeah, right. And and I think that there's one more thing, and I'd really like to bring that up if we have the time. But kids nowadays are very, very interested in investing, in learning to invest, because of the whole, the media surrounding Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and with whether it's GameStop or whether it's Robinhood, the free for all, we're democratizing trading. Or the issue is that investing is great, and that is something that they need to learn, yes. But the problem is that investing is like the roof of a house. You cannot put the roof of a house without strong walls and strong foundation. That is a recipe for disaster. But that is exactly where our kids are heading, because they want to learn about investing, so they're directly signing up to investing courses. Really? Teaching you to day trade, teaching you to stock pick, teaching you. So, and these kids don't understand, they're not mature enough, they don't have the intellectual capability at this point to understand how detrimental that is to their future. And this can be, when I say dangerous, I mean it in a very literal way. This is, on the 12th of June, it's the first death anniversary of Alex Keynes. He's a 20-year-old college student in Nebraska who committed suicide because he thought he was on the trading platform Robinhood, and he thought that he owed $700,000. It's just that he didn't know how to read it. It was a mistake, and he didn't realize that. And because he didn't want to burden his parents with the financial issue, he jumped in front of a train. This kid had even in his suicide note, he wrote, I had no idea what I was doing. He was allowed to trade options. He didn't know what that meant. He had no idea about anything that he was doing. I'm saying that this is an extreme example. But you see, and this is one, there are so many more people whose lives are completely ruined because they got into something that they didn't understand. They've got into trading thinking, I can make a quick buck. They need to understand there is no such thing as a quick buck.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is it's a hard lesson to learn because everybody wants a get-rich-quick scheme. But maybe this is an important lesson we should be teaching our kids. And like I said, investing is important, but there is a precursor to it. And the precursor is financial education. Because if your kid is not financially educated and has started investing, that is just a recipe for disaster. And if that's one thing, and I've seen this probably more in the last 6 months because of all the whole cryptocurrency, the media focus on that, is that every teenage talking about, so what about Bitcoin? What do you think? I'm like, I'm sorry, but I cannot answer that because that's a ridiculous question to ask at this point. You don't know what is the difference between a debit and a credit card. And I don't think yes, there is time for that, and we will get to that. But there are such certain building blocks that need to be put in place. And that's something that I think is one of the most damaging mistakes, I would say, would be that letting your kids get into the whole investing thing. And a lot of parents think, my kids are investing, they're trading, and I've had the conversation with the kids, and the kids are like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing something. It seems to be working.
It's like that. Seems to be working. They're giving it a try there, and until and unless they build that foundation, and we see that very often, that foundation is not there. That doesn't allow you or give you the framework to be able to deal with many of the more complicated, complex issues that might come across. You started off on this journey with wanting to teach your daughters about finance.
I know. That was
how did that go, and what happened? Would you like to give us a little bit about?
So about 4.5 years ago, my kids were 8 and 12 at the time, and I realized that they had no clue about money. They were just completely clueless. And I think it happened when they wanted me to buy them a horse. I thought it was a plastic. They were obsessed with animals, and I thought they wanted those plastic toys. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. They're like, oh, no, Mom. So we've done the research, because they know they got to come to me with research. We've done the research, and there's a horse in Germany, and there's free shipping, and she's family friendly. And I was like going on, one second. What are we talking about again? So they wanted to actually buy a real horse, and I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to say, in terms of me figuring out, okay, I need to teach these kids a little bit about wants and needs and expenditure and what, so that is what started it off. But also I say it's them, but it wasn't just them, right? Sure. It's not just it wasn't just my kids. The more I looked around, I saw that everybody's kids did it. And I didn't intend to start a company, Anselm. I wanted to just enroll them for a program. I was just looking for somebody to teach them this, and I'd be happy to enroll them for the program. Yep. But I didn't find that. Whatever I found was very, very trite advice, like have 3 jars and, the kind of thing, which, you've heard that. Yeah, you've heard. Yeah, exactly. And I thought that's not enough, right? They want, so I thought, how hard can it be? Yeah. So I studied myself. I got the curriculum and I said, I can teach this to you all. Oh, that was a mistake. Because like I told you, kids don't learn from their parents, right? So they just don't. But yet when I started the company and put the kids to the program, they'd come back with me like, Mom, do you know what we learned today? And oh my God, it's so amazing. Yeah. And I'd be like, hang on a second. You had no reaction. I told you the same thing. You had no reaction. Yeah. But of course, somebody else tells you. But that's the way it is. It's proximity bias again. Correct. And we just need to learn to not take it personally.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's in their best interest as well.
It's in their best interest, exactly. And I think it's also better when they learn from experts, because we wouldn't teach our own kids to drive, because do we always do the shoulder check? Yeah, we're not sure. Do we always show the thing? So I think it's great when kids learn from experts, because you're sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Yeah. Just because something is more complicated to discuss, we're not going to skip over it. Just because something's uncomfortable to talk about, we're not going to skip it. Yeah. So at least you have the certainty that you know that your kids are getting the best education if they're learning from experts, and that's just something that's also important to think about. Who's teaching your kids about money? Because money is something that you want it right. You get only one shot at it. You don't get to enroll your kids for 3 different financial education programs. That's not going to work. You only couldn't get to enroll them for one. So I think you really should make sure that whoever's teaching them has the right sort of integrity and just around the concept. And I think that's really important as well.
So you've come a long way, definitely, from starting out and getting to wanting your daughters to learn, and you've got now a company, several people working with you. You're running programs in schools and other institutions. You're running programs with corporates as well. What's next? Where do you go from here? What's your vision? What's the impact that you want to have?
Okay, I guess it's more impact than vision. But I'd really like to see this have a larger impact. So what we're doing, like for example, we have this, the partnership with Emirates NBD has come on board, but we're looking to work with more financial institutions who realize that it is in their interest to have more educated consumers. Yeah. Now, I know that's not typically right, but I think for financial institutions who have that sort of integrity, they realize that an educated customer actually works better for them. Absolutely. And I'd like to work with more financial institutions to get this out into the masses. Like, so I'd actually do this through schools, actually teach loads and loads of kids in a year to how to do this, because I can't do this alone. I can't do this with one part. This isn't a problem that one person or one organization can solve. But I think if everybody comes together, we can do this. And this initiative that we started, it's actually the first time that something like this has happened, where we've had banks come in and work with us to deliver this program to schools. It's a 3-way partnership, and it's worked fantastically. The schools are happy, the banks are happy, they're getting great. It's great for them. It's great for us, because our reach has suddenly become so much bigger. So for me, I think it would be so great to get more partners on board with this initiative. And yes, we're talking to so many, but it just, that for me would really make a big difference to see this grow.
That is awesome. And we're keeping a watch. We're really interested in seeing how this evolves and grows. All the very best to you. And
Thank you so much.
It's been fantastic having a conversation with you. I'm sure my children are going to be a part of the program. I'm going to send them across to you, and I hope they're reformed and come back.
That much I can guarantee. I make very few guarantees, but that I can.
Perfect. So, Marilyn, if our audience, listeners, parents want to get in touch with you, learn more, or find out how they can get their kids to be a part of the program, how do they do that? Where do they find you?
Well, the best way would be to get onto our website, which is kidsfinanceinitiative.com, and book a discovery call with us, because then we have a call with you and your kids and sort of really guide you as to the best fit, the best program fit for your child. I'm also very active on LinkedIn and on our social media handles. That's at kidsfinanceinitiative.com. So I think that should be easy enough to get in touch with us.
Perfect. Thank you once again, Marilyn. Have a fantastic day. And we
Thank you, Anselm. Thank you so much for having me here.
We hope to have you back again on the show at some point of time.
That's very kind.